Hello, and welcome to our new podcast that dives into the murky world of assessment in order to uncover some pedagogical gems for your teaching practice. My name is Sam Deno. I worked for 6 years in the secondary classroom before my switch to educational publishing 8 years ago. Obviously, this means I've had a long relationship with assessment, but never a deep one, and so now I'm planning on making it intimate. And speaking of intimate, this is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Paul. I was a primary teacher for over 12 years and I started off as a teaching assistant, worked as a teacher. I've even worked in leadership in schools as well, and assessment has been a huge part of all of those. So really looking forward to exploring assessment with you here, Sam. So I'll pass back to you.
Oh, well, here's our theme tune. Let me tell you about our podcast. Every episode, Paul and I will bury ourselves in academic journals, web articles, or blogs so that you don't have to. We'll draw out some juicy facts, discuss them, and then offer one key takeaway for you to chew over at the end. These are going to be short episodes, and our hope is that you'll be able to absorb them as part of your professional development, or simply because we've made assessment chat an essential part of your week. So, Paul, what have you been exploring?
Well, this week I have been diving into the murky world and the murky past of assessment, going quite a long way back. Because quite interestingly to me, and perhaps our listeners will have this same impression, assessment always kind of felt like this never-ending hamster wheel of a task that just you couldn't ever get off of it. Once you started, you could just never stop. And I wondered why it became this way. And interestingly, while I was doing a little bit of hunting around some of the up-to-date Ofsted guidance, it's clear that they realise this, and they're saying that in many schools across England, assessment is too often creating unnecessary burdens for staff and for pupils. So there's also been some recent research which has found that teachers are spending over 6 hours a week on assessment-related tasks, which I believe equates to around 44 days.
Whoa.
44 full days on stuff like testing, recording, monitoring, analysing data. And there'll be some of our listeners probably thinking, I can relate to that, I'm doing that, if not more. And for those of you who are listening thinking that's mad and you're getting away with doing a lot less, we'd love to hear how you're managing it, and that's certainly something we want to look at today. But yeah, in light of this, we're kind of wondering, is it any wonder that our latest school workforce survey is showing record numbers of our fantastic teachers leaving the profession? So I was really keen to look back into the history of assessment and find out how has it become this unmanageable, cumbersome task, which is, meaning that teachers are being put off of this fantastic career.
So have you got some historical milestones then?
Well, interestingly I have. So, assessment is certainly not a new thing. It's been around for absolutely years. In fact, in ancient times, there's examples of assessment being used in ancient China, back as far as 2,500 to 3,000 years ago, where it's essentially used to kind of identify students with the most potential to go on to, very, very important jobs, looking after the population and bureaucratic matters for the emperor.
So elitism.
Absolutely. And that seemed to be kind of the way that it began. And then obviously across Europe, education and assessment, grew through the Roman Empire, and then the Church, who established, a majority of schools and universities across our country and across Europe. And up until about 1870, education was mostly provided by the Church. And it was then during the Victorian era that they came up with this idea of payment by results. So as a school, you could be funded according to how many pupils that you had in your school who were passing the assessments in what were called the 3 R's, which were reading, writing and arithmetic. Obviously then we kind of come into the wartime where, a lot of assessment was very much at teachers' discretion. And at this point, the only statutory assessment was the 11 plus exam, which again was kind of used to filter students off into either grammar or secondary modern schools.
Well, I was going to say, would it be fair to say then that everything that you've mentioned up until this point fed into an elitist attitude towards education and assessment?
I would suggest so. Certainly, it seems to be that, however well you did as an individual, then would feed into where you could get to in society. And certainly the onus was very much on the aptitude and ability of the individual. However, I think probably by 1975, it seems that the focus began to shift away from how well the pupil was doing onto actually how well the school was performing. And the Department of Education and Science, their Assessment and Performance Unit, was set up around 1975, which essentially was promoting methods of monitoring student achievement, and national standards were set for schools to get pupils to perform at a certain level in reading, writing and arithmetic, which essentially kind of laid the foundations for this onerous assessment that we find today.
Yeah, you can see the antecedents there, can't you?
Absolutely, and certainly I think over the years the pressure on schools has just continued to intensify. Obviously in 88, we've got the statutory assessments being introduced at the 4 key stages that, they're still there today. We've got the league tables, which were essentially created to provide parents with all the information they needed to select the school that they wanted. And schools have just been continually pressed to improve the performance of their pupils. And I would say it's probably still continuing to this day. Obviously, not quite so long ago, within the last 10 years, in 2014, in fact, the DfE set the bar higher for schools. They basically decided from what they could see that, the levels weren't good enough, and they set schools a challenging aspiration of, making sure that 85% of their children could achieve this expected standard by the end of primary schools. And, to this end, we'll have, noticed there's been more and more assessments added. We've got the phonics screening check, the reception baseline, we've got the revised SATs that have come out, we've got the multiplication and times tables check that's been introduced, and obviously other, continuing assessments alongside that we've still got today. And I think, just the whole range of things that schools have got to contend with has just increased the pressure enormously. So what's entertaining is that, kind of by 2017, the DfE had come to this realisation that, actually, we've created an enormous workload here. And in their words, they've called this a disproportionate burden on teachers, that this new system actually needs to be improved so that, staff are actually able to do their job and have this sense of well-being in their role.
Yeah, but by 2017, you say, but surely we're still in a state of crisis with school recruitment and retention. Has anything given in terms of assessment since then?
That's a really, valid and interesting question. Yeah, they've obviously highlighted this, over seven years ago now. And as you say, actually, in light of the scores coming through from the workforce survey, actually it would seem that perhaps things haven't given. And across history, as we've kind of seen, the pressures have just continued to grow in terms of accountability for schools. And in spite of, the fact that the government are aware of this, actually, I think, the pressures are still there. And for now, the accountability measures, progress, attainment data, inspections, performance tables, they're still in place. So perhaps, the question isn't actually how much progress our teachers, schools or pupils are making, but actually in terms of the fact that we've had 7 years of knowledge that, this is a really, really key and, time-consuming aspect of teaching. Actually, how much progress has the government made in providing, a system of assessment which is fair, which recognises that teachers are professionals and know how to assess and motivate their pupils, and, how to avoid imposing these incredibly difficult workloads on their staff.
I mean, this is all brilliant stuff, Paul. As you say, the government is accountable for the way our systems work. So therefore, is it hopeless to think that our audience can take anything away from this, or are there actions we can take, teachers can take, to make small differences when it comes to their assessment approaches? I suppose I'm asking you if there's one key takeaway.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think one key takeaway is that, yes, I think there is hope. Certainly this year, Ofsted and the government have put out guidance on reducing the workload. They are aware. Um, Interestingly, they've kind of put the onus on schools, and they've provided lots of case studies from schools about how they are approaching this. So it's very much, again, back on the teachers and for you and your school and your leaders to decide, what are your kind of key drivers, what are your key ambitions to help your students succeed. But I think probably, yeah, just a couple of little things that you could consider, and that if you want to look into the case studies, do. But a couple of things I would suggest. Consider using existing schemes of work that have those inbuilt assessment materials and tools. I know certainly from my own experience, you can spend a lot of time, and those 6 hours are quickly eaten up by you creating all your own resources and all your own assessment materials, along with all the time that you're going to spend analysing and finding that catch-up material. So, Ofsted are open to you adopting schemes of work, and essentially I think the focus for Ofsted now is on how that curriculum's taught and how it's assessed. So certainly I would say don't be afraid of using things that are already out there. Certainly here at Twinkle we've been really thinking about how we can develop those tools to support you to deliver and assess that learning. And I'd say probably one of the other big game changers with saving teacher time is AI. I think the progress we've seen with AI is fantastic. There are some great tools available. Again, here at Twinkle, we've got things like Report Writer that can turn your notes into full reports. We've got tools that can generate assessment resources like quizzes and comprehensions, closed passages, all the sorts of things that you are going to want to very quickly assess, but without taking up all of your time. Essentially, I don't believe that teachers should be spending over 6 hours a week just on the assessment side. Ultimately, I think the heart of teaching is to invest in those students who are in front of us. And so in any way that we can reduce the time on admin tasks and increase the time that we are investing in those students that we see, I think that's certainly my big takeaway. Have a look at what's there, see what we can use so that we can give the best of ourselves to our pupils.
I love that. Thank you. That's great. We're gonna wrap up now, aren't we? Thank you so much for listening. There is an associated blog on the Twinkle website that you will be able to get a hold of. We'll include it in the link description below. And we'd love your comments, like, subscribes, and all those things. Goodbye for now.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.